All right, so right now we're about to start covering 2.16 to talk about slavery and freedom in Brazil. Do we have anybody in here that has Brazilian ancestry? Does anybody know anybody from Brazil that's in here? I say, y'all go here to school, you gotta know somebody. All right, so we'll kind of talk about what's going on down there in South America to get our conversation started. All right, so understanding the diasporic connections in Brazil. That's the first thing. You have to first remember that Brazil have by far one of the largest enslaved populations in the Western Hemisphere. So today, what I really want to be talking about is the results of slavery and the subsequent journey towards freedom in Brazil. Remember, Brazil is in South America. We're going to talk about the historical analysis in the context of the transatlantic slave trade, cultural practices, and then just in general the significant roles of the end of slavery in Brazil and also how it connects here to the United States. If you understand me so far, say yes. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the context first. So, like I stated earlier, Brazil received the highest number of enslaved Africans to the Americas, approximately 5 million, but you can make that number go a lot higher, and in some cases, maybe a lot lower, mainly through what we now know as the Middle Passage, which we already talked about so far. Yes? Okay. And again, remember I told you, if you look at the idea of geography or even oceanography and meteorology, if you're in a ship coming from the west coast of Africa, if you're doing that little, remember, you're not gonna go straight. You're gonna have like a little curve. That curve will go first into South America, and then depending on the wind currents, you might go further north. But America came into the slave trade a lot later. And again, remember what original European power was colonizing South America? Spanish, Portuguese, English. Those are your three options. Which one? Raise your hand for Portuguese. Portuguese would be correct because guess what language they speak down in Brazil? Portuguese. That's one way to always kind of know who colonized what because of the language they spoke. All right. Then now you have the labor sections. Now, enslaved Africans worked in diverse areas such as plantations, but also gold mines, particularly down in Brazil. You didn't see that a lot here in the North America. As far as the Americas, they work more so on the fields, as far as rice and different grains like indigo. But down in South America, they did a lot more mining. Okay. Now, why you care about that? That's a lot more harsher work. Is everybody follow me on that? Even mining now is still difficult, let alone back then. So now this shaped their economy from the 16th to 19th centuries. That means from the 1500s to about the 1800s, meaning very, very not only just agriculture but also looking into mines. Okay, you with me so far? Okay. Now, one thing you want to understand about Brazil and also the West Indies, they had something that was called the seasoning process. Now, who cooks in here? It's a bad analogy, but there's no way to say it but what I'm about to say, okay? When you first get some food, you think about you gotta season it, right? Anybody that cooks knows if you used to cook raw meat, it kind of has like a rough smell to it, and then you put some kind of seasoning on it, right? So now the idea here is that you have to season your slaves to be better slaves. A slave that's coming right off the ship is still remembering their old ways. Everybody got me on that? So you have to find a way to season them, for lack of a better phrase, to make them become more compliant and easier to deal with when you get there. They really did very well with that, both in the West Indies, meaning the Caribbean, but also down in Brazil. The America, as far as North America and United States, they got more seasoned slaves and they got slaves come directly from the continent. Does that make sense, to everybody? Which means they also paid more money for those slaves coming here. So I make sure you have some connections between what's going on in Brazil and also the United States. Y'all good so far with me? Still with me? Okay. All right. Now, even though they were enslaved, they did try to preserve their culture, and they did that in numerous different ways. One way they did that is in Brazil, they fostered the creation of vibrant communities that maintained and adapted their cultural identities. These communities became focal points for their preservation of African traditions. Now, when we start talking about things in a second, you might say things like carnival, things like that. It all has very deep African traditions, even the dance fighting Capoeira. So these are all things that still rooted in African culture. Is everybody follow me there? And remember, we already talked about what happened with the Haitian Revolution, also things that happened in Jamaica. So this is still continuing that same idea. Everybody follow? Okay. Continuing on. All right, so I just mentioned Capoeira. So this is a symbol of resistance. This right here is when you had African enslaved African. Excuse me. It's a martial art developed by enslaved Africans. You gotta remember, a lot of your enslaved Africans that we spoke about earlier, a lot of them were warriors, right? So they knew how to fight. So they found ways to work within the system they were in. So this practice combines both dance, music, and acrobatic movements, reflecting the tradition of both African culture elements and also those who was found in Brazilian society. So they really merged in what we call culture diffusion as far as merging of cultures. Okay. Has anyone ever heard of this fighting style? Okay. As a person that trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I actually had some instructors that was really good with this. Those dudes are just different. That's all I'm gonna say. But this, I want to show you this quick video here as well. This kind of goes a little bit more. Hopefully it plays. Oh, it's not playing. All right, sorry, it's a video. I'm gonna show you, but it's not playing. Of course now. All right. Has anyone heard of this festival? Anyone heard of this festival? No? Okay. How do you say it? Congada Festival. Now, this is a tradition celebrated that honors both the king of the Congo and the lady of the Rosary. You're going to hear about them in a second. This festival is not only showcases the artistic expression of the enslaved Africans, but also it reinforces their communal ties to that of their cultural heritage. This is typically confused with Carnival in some aspects. Did I got me on that? As far as the dress, the dance, things like that. And again, when I start showing you some pictures of it, you immediately probably start thinking of Carnival, but it's some differences there too, okay? But again, this is still all them. When I say them, talk about those enslaved Africans coming into Brazil. What they're doing is just basically merging their culture with what is there to make their own. Okay, y'all with me? Any questions so far? Okay. All right. So the significance of that festival. First, make sure you know this picture on the left is one of the primary documents of the festival. Lady of the Rosary showcases Afro-Catholic traditions, emphasizing how enslaved individuals in Brazil adopted their cultural practice to within a new context. So what they did is take, okay, this is what the Portuguese is doing, but let's kind of bring in our own culture as well. Does that make sense? Again, that's the idea called cultural diffusion. Make sure I remember that word, especially when you're writing. That's anytime you have a mixing of cultures together. Okay, and again, this is just an example of that, written by Carlos Julio. He's a very, very prominent artist of the time period. They did a good job of really depicting from the 1700s the visual testaments of what's going on in Brazil. It really reveals a blending of both African and Catholic elements, highlighting both enslaved communities and how they found ways to celebrate their identity, still maintaining a sense of self, but also maintaining a sense of self within the confines of this new culture that they are now forced to be within because they are slaves. We good? Any questions? No. All right. So again, now here, what you have done, we always talk about, but these are example of two children that were enslaved as well. So this is artwork given by Jose Cristano, and this is from 1864. Depicts the slave children arriving in Brazil during the collapse of most likely the Oyo Empire. Is that got me on that? That's the Oyo Empire that's living in Africa. So sometime around that collapse, you start seeing more of an influx of particularly children being enslaved. The price highlights the circumstances of their arrival and serves as a reminder of the youth and their vulnerability to coming to a foreign land. And then over here on the right, you see how the prices of labor diversity. You're still trying to find a way to mix in their culture. Again, this is done by an artist rep. What can I say? Is an artist view of what's going on, but what you can still see is that you can see children still dancing and working. Is that right? Got me on that? And that's the idea. So showcasing how communities adapted and still maintain aspects of their heritage while still living within the confines of being a slave on the plantation, the mine, etc., etc. Y'all with me still so far? Yes, no? Remember we all talked about how the drum was used, the bongo. Remember all those conversations? This is still showing how that form of assimilation within this other culture, but still maintaining your own sense of self. All right, now, Capoeira is a symbol of resistance. Going back to that, this originated among enslaved Africans in Brazil. It's a self-defense defense style, but also an outlet for cultural preservation, also expression. Everybody got me on that? I'm sorry the video did not work, but it's a fighting style, but it looks like you're dancing. Is everybody clear there? You go to a beat. Has anyone ever played Street Fighter? DJ? That's an example of that coming out. And you have a couple of more artists in like Street Fighter 6 right now that I forget the young lady's name, but she's from Brazil and she has a level of Capoeira in her dance fighting move as well. But it's dance, you dance to a beat. Anyone ever saw Jumanji? The new movie one? I forgot the lady name. Remember the one that she dance fights? You know, nobody know what I'm talking about? Okay. Y'all don't watch nothing on TV, do you? Okay, maybe I got younger kids, but still, y'all help me out here. The idea is that it is a form of self-defense, but you dance it to a beat. Is everybody got me on that? That beat typically coming from that drum, which then goes back to Africa. Everybody following? Y'all follow me so far? Okay. All right. Now, we're going to talk about the shift in enslaved populations through the 19th century. The 19th century will, of course, be the 1800s. You have a decrease of enslaved population in Brazil. So now, let's keep this in mind. They still have a lot of slaves, all right? But you see the decrease in the importation of them, and it's mainly because of the rise in manumissions influenced by Liberian legal frameworks and the advocacy of the Catholic Church, saying that this is a bad thing. Took a long time to say that, but they eventually did say that. This shift allowed for a growing number of enslaved individuals to gain their freedom, contributing to a larger free black population, particularly down in Brazil. Does everybody got me on that? So this is in the 1800s. Now, be clear, Brazil still has a very fluid dynamic with the black population there, which we'll see momentarily in the video. But I did want to give y'all this background. Now, the slavery ended in 1888. Okay, so in 1888, Brazil became the first nation in the Americas to abolish slavery altogether, and it was a pretty pivotal point in history. This marked a change in where you had approximately 1.5 Africans being liberated, meaning being free. Does everybody got me on that? Does everybody follow? When was the American Civil War? Anybody know? When did the American Civil War end? 1865. So again, the Civil War, you have the 13th Amendment, but this is when you have another nation that's really doing it. Okay. Did I follow? Any questions so far? Okay. All right. Now we talk about Brazil and the United States. The growth of enslaved population started growing in the United States. In contrast, the United States had an increase in the number of enslaved throughout the 19th century due to natural population growth and the birth of enslaved children. Remember, you had laws that said that if your mama was a slave, guess what you're going to be? If your great granddad is a slave, guess what you are? So even though you may not be buying them, they're still reproducing in the sense that you're taking the status of your elder. Does everybody got me on that? Which allowed this to continue here in the United States. So by the time you had the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863, the number of enslaved Africans reached approximately 4 million. You can make that number be a lot higher because they wasn't necessarily keeping track of all that. Because remember, slaves were still not seen as people, but they were seen as products and goods. Does everybody got me on that? And there's no other way to say it but that way. And then again, this was mainly for social economic reasons because at this time, right around the Civil War, you had the growth of cotton, which is a very high, intense crop that needs a lot of hands. Has anyone ever seen cotton come off of the cotton plant? It's not. You can go see it not far from here, right? And if you ever touch has anyone ever touched a rose before? Rose got thorns in it, right? Cotton. Now again, the cotton looks like that. It looks very nice, looks white and fluffy until you touch it. You can constantly keep bleeding because it has nothing but like a lot of thorns, and that's why it makes it so hard. Does everybody got me on that? Which is why the cotton gin was a very big deal because it allowed them to now be able to take a lot of those thorns out to be able to use for cotton. Everybody follow? So again, very, very hard crop to cultivate. Now, the impact of manumission on freedom in Brazil. All right, so manumission is a legal process in which slaves and individuals went free. This was significant because it helps with the growth of the black population in Brazil that are now also free. It influenced by Liberian laws, and like I said earlier, also the Catholic Church. And then again, by 1888, all slavery was ended where?